All right, I've started over. This is a new attempt. We're going to talk about my StepManiaX integration into DeadSync today. This is a little video tutorial. So to turn it on, if you have SMX pads, you can go into input options and we'll look at test input. So normally the SMX pad input is through USB, it goes through the operating system, and it shows up here as like raw buttons. They're just like raw gamepad buttons with weird numbers attached to them and all that kind of stuff. So this is what people will usually see using SMX pads. So if we go to input options and then input options, these are FSR pads. Some of them are load cell, and those will still work. But for ease of terminology, we're just going to say they're FSRs too. So you hit yes. There's a special StepManiaX option here, so you can open that. Okay, so first you'll need to turn this on. This requires a restart because the StepManiaX system has to start up when DeadSync starts. So I'll go over this other stuff here on a restart. So we'll say yes, we'll exit, we'll exit, we'll exit. Okay, so now the settings should be saved. You start it again, and you look at the top left, you can see the pad is connected. Both are, but I think it just shows whichever one connected last just because it's so quick. So let's go to options here, and let me show you a quick test input. So now we're directly communicating with the StepManiaX pads to get its input. So it's bypassing the OS entirely. I already have everything connected to the input, but something I can show you is the middles aren't going to be mapped. And so it gives you a nice little name for it. So StepManiaX, those are the first 4 digits of the serial number, and C, center, right? Center. All the other arrows are mapped. Again, center, not mapped, but the other arrows are mapped. So you get like a nice name, which is useful if we look at the configuration. Right, left, right, up, down, left, right, up, down, and theoretically, because I know when you go through the OS, sometimes the left and right pad get swapped based on the enumeration order that the USB pads get enumerated. And this is annoying because like every time you play you have to go in and like maybe left is 2-player or right is 2-player and you have to swap it. So this should like keep that forever because it's basically serial number based. And left will always, P1 will always be P1, P2 will always be P2. So that kind of solves like that kind of potential issue. So we'll go to the StepManiaX options again so I can kind of explain some other stuff. Okay, DeadSync manages pad config. So by default this is set to no. So by default, I guess I'll kind of go into a little other stuff. This now ships with like a full-on configuration UI for the StepManiaX pads. So by default, if this is set to no, you have to use the configuration. You can use the SMX config program, you can use the config in DeadSync. Basically, DeadSync doesn't touch the config unless it's told. So if you edit it in the program, you edit it outside the program, configs are stored on the pads, DeadSync won't like touch that. If you set it to yes, I've implemented a system where your DeadSync profile can save multiple pad configs. You can designate a pad config as a default config for a specific pad based on serial number. And when you load up the game and choose your profile, if you've set a default, it will just flash that default onto the pad. So like, if you're switching between StepManiaX and ITG, StepManiaX will rewrite the pad config because it uses its own pad configs. And then if you go back to ITG, this will rewrite it for you again, and you don't have to mess with changing the configs every time you switch between the games. So I think that's really helpful. Even if you don't save profile configs, really this should probably go up one. But I've added the same 3 configs that SMX uses, and this kind of just sets what the default is. So if DeadSync is managing the pad config, let's say a guest profile starts the game, or a profile without saved config starts the game, it'll just flash it to whatever this selection is. Like say it's a public machine with SMX pads. You can just have whichever one of these as your default. I like low. Okay, this is a little bit more of a power user thing. I don't really know that it makes a huge difference, honestly. But the StepManiaX SDK that I've ported twice now to Rust. So it checks the pad inputs. By default, it's every 1,000 microseconds, which is 1 millisecond. Because typically the maximum throughput of USB is 1,000 times a second, so every 1 millisecond. So this is the default. The default, we're checking every millisecond to see if there's a new update. If you have CPU cycles to spare, you can bring this all the way down to 500 microseconds. So every half millisecond it's checking. And this might not really do anything, honestly, but it just gives you more resolution to make sure you're getting those inputs as soon as they possibly show up. Because the time that the pad sends it to the computer and the time that we're checking might not necessarily match up all the time. And we're talking sub-millisecond response times here. So it might matter. I keep it at this just because I have cycles to spare. I don't really know the difference as far as like how much CPU it's using one way or the other, but yeah. Anyways, those are the StepManiaX configs I have. So let's look at the pad config. So you'll see a warning at the top if DeadSync managing pad config is on. So if the management is off, like this could be where you set your pad configs basically, if you want. But if management is on, this is just kind of just to see what's going on here if you want to just look around. So by default, you get like a simple view of 1 or 2 pads, and you can just change the thresholds. So by default, it's by 5. If you hold shift, you can change it by 1. And so if you hit enter, you get the advanced config editor. So this will only show you 1 pad at a time. If you go back, you just have to hit enter on whichever pad you're currently on. So back here, it'll show you P1. Over here, it'll show you P2. So this lets you set a configuration for each individual sensor in each arrow. So you got the whole left panel here, you got the left sensor, the down sensor, the up sensor, the right sensor. And you can individually turn these off and on as well. So let's say for the left, I know some people only want this inside sensor on. So you can turn all three of those off and they'll never trigger. They don't trigger. If you turn them all off, I didn't actually test this. Yeah, if you turn them all off for some reason, like by accident, this will show you off. Just in case you like do it by accident and you're trying to figure out why your pad stopped working, this will tell you. Yeah, so you can turn all these off or on. You can set individual sensors to whatever you want. And then there's two extra advanced settings here that some people like to adjust. So there's auto recalibration. The SMX pads will auto recalibrate after a certain amount of time of no changes. And this is just to kind of reset its internal like thresholds and stuff. Some people say it like messes with their game, specifically stamina players. So you can turn that off if you really want, and it'll stop recalibrating itself. And then the debounce. So there's a hardware debounce on the StepManiaX pads. The config says not to edit this, but people do it anyway, so I added it in. So a hardware debounce means this is how much time we're waiting on a state change before we trust that the state change is true. So if you press down, it's saying I am going to wait I'm going to wait until it's down for 4 milliseconds consistently before I treat it as a down, and then I'm going to wait 4 milliseconds on an up consistently until I treat it as an up. So I've turned this down to 2 actually on my own config because I think foot switches work a little better that way. But yeah, it's a thing you can do. Yeah, 4 is the default. Okay, so that's basically the config. Pretty bog standard. So now if we go to gameplay, here's like some cooler stuff. Shoutouts to Pilot for suggesting this because I think it's a really cool feature. So if you go to the extra special option pane here, we have pad profile. So right now I'm on just one player. So if you open this up, it'll show you there's the 3 default profiles that are baked into the game, and then here are 2 pad profiles that I have. So super low is my default. So typically it'll just auto choose this one. There may be a bug in there where it's not highlighting it. But anyway, yeah, so now it's green. It's got the star to tell you this is the one that's selected. And you can just change it, and it'll change. So if you have like a foot switch profile, and you're like, oh man, like I really need to use the foot switch profile for this, you can just go here, choose the profile, and you're done. No fucking around with the config, like, you know what I mean? It's quick. But on top of all this, you can also go directly into the pad configuration. So same thing as the other, screen I was showing you earlier. If you hit the select button, you can see profiles. You can change which one's set to default. And so one downside here is that this really only works with keyboard navigation. Like you can see at the bottom, like R is rename, O is overwrite. You gotta use delete for delete. It makes you confirm. If you have multiple, like you can name these whatever you want, so they're useful names. You can decide if it's default here or on the other screen. Yeah, if you have multiple, you can also just turn on whichever config here if you want. Yeah, set default, and so forth. I'll delete this one because I don't need it. And yeah, there you go. Like, you can do whatever, go to profile, save it as new, and you're done. Right? It's that easy. It's that easy. And I think that's it, really. Yeah, so these are saved to your profile. I actually did want to show one more thing. So these are saved to your profile in a human readable format. So in your profile, it's just padconfig.ini, and these are just human readable. If for some reason you need to edit this manually after the fact, like on a public machine or something, right, you got the name, it's for an SMX pad, it's for an FSR style SMX pad. It was made for this serial pad. Even if you make a config for a specific pad, you can use it on any pad that you want. So right now I have this specific profile as default for both of these pads. And then here's all the individual values here. Oh right, there was another thing. It's hard to remember everything here. Let's see. There's a couple different like possibilities. So if you're guest, you can only choose the 3 baked-in profiles here. You can manually configure it for your session, but there's no profiles to save. You can't save them because guest doesn't have a profile. So it's kind of just very transient in that case. So let's say I go to double. Right, now you have a player 2 pad profile to choose from, player 2 sensitivity, or a player 1 profile and sensitivity to choose from. And again, you get the full setup here. The advanced if you want, the profile selection. So you can here, let me show something here. If I have a second one here, like these defaults can be set per pad. Oh, interesting. That's a bug. I'll have to fix that. So all the profiles should show up that are tied to your profile, and so I can set the right pad to have the default FDDG, and the left pad's default is super low. So the idea is that you can set defaults per pad, because sometimes one pad might be more sensitive in one arrow than the other, or something like that. And yeah, so like for doubles, you can have your own like doubles set up. I don't have like defaults per mode or anything, but switching them should be pretty easy. And then one last thing. Let's say you have 2 players, and so this pad has a profile, right? Super low, and this pad is a guest. So again, this pad can only use the built-in ones if it's guest. And if you look at configure, there's no profile selection for this one, again because it's a guest. This one you can still mess with the profiles and stuff. And if you switch profiles here, Like let's say now I want this guy to be bar pi. It will, you know, now it's loaded bar low here because that's my bar pi default. So yeah, it works on, and now you can see it, you can look at the profiles now for this user. Okay, I think that's it. I think that gives an explanation. This has been like 20 minutes of explanation. So I'm sorry for the super verbose explanation, but I think this should kind of explain everything. I look forward to people using this. Please let me know if you have any suggestions or if there's friction somewhere. I know it doesn't quite work for free input style. You have to use dedicated buttons for it. So if there's any ideas out there for how to improve this, any bugs or suggestions, let me know.